There are things about Donald Trump that concern me, and I think
Hmm.
I want to hear from you your thoughts on that. Number one, when he talks about the enemy within, talks about hiring our own military to go after certain members of the media, to go after somebody that he might not like, a political rival, an Adam Schiff, for example. That concerns me. I think 20 million deporting 20 million illegal immigrants and separating families is not something that I would certainly think is a very good idea. I don't know how he would do that. I think it would pummel the economy. I think his tariffs are an absolute joke. I was just interviewing Mark Cuban a few weeks ago and some other friends of mine that have a lot of money. They don't think, even some that voted for Donald Trump, they think this is a really bad idea. I think that's very concerning to me. Yes, I do think some of the people that he's hired so far to be put in his administration, like a Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I think is an absolute kook conspiracy theorist, who might have some good ideas as well. But I think he has, some crazy things that he talks about, whether it be COVID, going after certain ethnicities, the comments he's made in the past about vaccines. So I have a lot of concerns, and I look at Donald Trump's first 4 years. He got us $8.2 trillion in debt. I look at the economy that he left Joe Biden. Obviously, a big part of that, right, was because of COVID. But I thought his handling of COVID was an F minus. 15 cases down to 0. It's going to be gone by Easter. Turning COVID press conferences, Will, into campaign rallies, it seemed. And yes, we can go to his behavior, the things he says. But, a part of it to me is policy. A big part of it, of course, is incitement of violence, what took place on January 6th. The fact that he still doesn't admit that he lost the 2020 election. So I know I just gave you a long laundry list there, Will.
Yeah, that's a laundry list.
I know,
I
apologize
I'll pick a few to start talking about.
Sure, please do.
Let's start. I think let's start with mass deportation, right? This is an important point, and I hear this one, especially family separation. Families are separated every single day in this country as a result of people committing crimes. Let's start there. You commit a crime and you go to get arrested or you're convicted of a crime, you are separated from your family if you have children. Sorry, that's the way it works, right? Like, family separation in this country is not seen as a reason to not punish people for committing crimes and to not enforce the law. So very simply put, and I think Tom Homan had was mildly flippant, but he had a good point here, which is that if you're an illegal immigrant family, we don't have to separate you to deport you. We can deport you altogether.
Can I ask you something about that, Will?
Sure.
So a part of me certainly agrees with you, but let's get rid of the violent criminals first, right? Let's get rid of the people that are a danger to society. I'm with you on that. I'm with Republicans. I think most of the country agrees on that. You come into this country illegally and you commit a violent crime, or get out. We want you out. We want you behind bars. I'm 100% on board. The things that I'm concerned about, Will, and you can tell me your thoughts on this. Let's just say someone's been living in this country for decades. They're not documented. They have kids that were born here. I'm not saying they shouldn't have to, pay a fine or have some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Pay some sort of price for breaking the law. But you have a family here, you have kids here. I'm not saying, okay, you're all of a sudden you're documented. I'm not saying it should be that easy, but I just don't think we should be getting rid of those people who pay taxes, who are not violent criminals. And I think there should be some sort of easier pathway to citizenship for those people. Does that make sense?
I understand that argument and just simply disagree with it. I think if you're, and this is, I might disagree when it comes to something like dreamers, right? Like, I'd say to a dreamer, it's like, I think Blake Masters actually had a very good take on dreamers, which is essentially dreamers can be granted permanent residence, but no citizenship, right? Like, basically the idea being that if your first contact with this country is to have entered illegally, if you were brought here against, you were 3 and you had no involvement in it, this is the only language, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you can have permanent residence, but you're not going to be a citizen. Like, we're never going to grant citizenship on the basis of illegal immigration. And I think that is, you have to think about the incentive structure that you're creating for people to do this, right? If you suddenly say, oh, well, you've been here a really long time, then we're going to overlook your, crossing illegally.
Right.
That's a massive incentive for people to cross illegally. And I think foundationally, one of the reasons I find the Democrat position, the moderate position, to actually be the worst of all worlds. I think pure open borders would be more moral than the Democrat position, and I'll explain. The Democrat position of sort of this middling, weak enforcement of immigration law and wanting to, we have a border, we have lots of border security, but if you make it across, we'll take you. And if you stay long enough, we'll want to let you get away with citizenship. You're putting people into the hands of the cartels. That's what you're doing when you do that, because you're dangling a reward. Well, in tort law, there's something called attractive nuisance. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes, I have. Yep.
right? The idea that if you on your lawn have like a dangerous thing that would attract children and they harm themselves, even if those children are trespassing, you, the homeowner, are liable because you've created a danger on your property.
I get
I
that.
view the Democrat policy on immigration is to create a massive attractive nuisance for illegal immigrants, to draw them into this country, to plunge them into an unbelievably dangerous journey in the hands of drug cartels across, death. I mean, I think that's just appalling. So I think open borders is more ethical than that. But since I think the foremost obligation of our government is to its own citizens, and clearly the American public is demanding enforcement of immigration law. Trump explicitly ran on the promise of mass deportation. He made no bones about it, and he won more votes than the Democrats. I think
he did. But if somebody would say to you, well, in 2016, he ran on, we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. He didn't really accomplish that either, though. So that's why I don't think they're going to deport. I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I don't think they're going to deport 20 million people. I don't think it's plausible. I don't know how they're going to do it. They haven't really explained how they're going to do it. Getting rid of the violent criminals, let's do it. Number one priority, good. Let's get that done. I'm with you. But I just don't think it's plausible that they're going to be deporting 20 million people. How would they even do that?
I think you have, obviously you start by, you deport one at a time, right? You deport 1 million at a time. Let's start with deporting 1 million at the top of the list. But the other part of this is obviously going to rely on some amount of self-deportation by really cracking down on employing illegal immigrants, right? Like really aggressively cracking down. So at the point, it's like, I think basically there should be federal laws that ban, for example, the giving out of driver's licenses to illegal immigrants, the giving out of, and all these little benefits that little states are trying to give to illegal immigrants. Those should be banned at the federal level. Shouldn't be allowed. And you just basically, like, this should not be a hospitable country if you're an illegal immigrant. If you're an illegal immigrant, you should be in your day-to-day life recognizing that this sucks. I want to go home. Like that should be that should be instantiated federal law and put down through the rest of the country, and that will ultimately lead to self-deportation and then a return to a world where people, if they want to immigrate to this country, they feel like the answer is not to just go plunge themselves into the hands of a coyote and cross the border. The answer is wait in line.
I know, but I just don't think it should take 10 years in so many different cases, 10 years to become a naturalized citizen. I think we need to do something about that. I also never hear about those who overstay their visas. I mean, you look at the millions and millions of people. We didn't hear that in the Trump administration. We certainly didn't hear that in the Biden administration. We only hear about border crossings, which is important. I'm not saying that's not important, but there are a lot of people in this country that overstay their visas, and I never hear any solutions to that either, Will,
I mean, the solutions are sort of, both increased and substantially increased enforcement and substantially increased cracking down on the employability of illegal immigrants. Like you make life in this country inhospitable to illegal immigrants, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. Like, and basically it's the opposite of what a lot of these blue states have been doing, which is they've been actively trying to make things more hospitable to illegal immigrants, which feeds right back into the attractiveness.
Yeah, I understand that. I think you make some very valid points there. The last thing when it comes to, this is what frustrates me, and I don't think you do this, but some of the MAGA Republicans, they'll talk about Lincoln Riley, right? Horrible situation, terrible crime. I hope that guy, I wish he would get the electric chair. I'm for capital punishment, by the way, which he's not going to get. But with that being said, there were also people that were and brutally murdered under the Trump administration too. I mentioned some of those names yesterday. Do I blame Donald Trump for that? No. Do I necessarily blame Joe Biden for this murder? No. I think Republicans and Democrats need to work together there. What I don't like is they're eating our cats and dogs. That turned out not to be true. Sometimes people make it sound like if you're an illegal in this country, they're going to rape your wife and kidnap your kids. A small percentage of these people do very bad things. We both don't want those kinds of people in this country. I'm with you. I just don't like that rhetoric. And I thought when Trump and Vance did that in Springfield, Ohio, and said the eating the cats and the dogs, there were bomb threats and over 50 threats to that city. I just thought that was wrong. I think there's a way of going about it like what you're doing and what you're discussing and what you're talking about than talking about, legal Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. I thought that was wrong. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch to call them legal immigrants. Like they have temporary protected status from deportation because they, right? Like that's calling them legal immigrants are people who've gone through the system and have, gotten visas.
But even if they were illegal, let's just say 100% for argument's sake, I'm on your side there. Let's just say, even though under the Biden administration, they were technically not illegal. But even if that was true, I still don't like it when the day before the presidential debate, when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump were told that these stories were not true, because we've learned in reports that they were told from the city manager to the mayor to the Republican governor. This is not true. And if JD Vance says, well, my constituents, I got some reports, that still doesn't mean it's true. And
well,
then
this is where I flat disagree with you. I think the city manager, the city manager makes claims that they're not true, but that like how does he know, right? How does he know that didn't happen? Did he fully investigate? He's just saying, oh, we don't have that. So I don't buy that. It's like if he's saying I have reports from constituents that say X, and then the city manager says, well, I haven't heard about those reports. It's like, okay, but like right now, we're at a point where it's like there needs to be more investigation, not the city manager's word is bond on this question.
Well,
I think the city manager had to retract something, didn't he? That's my understanding.
Said that there were no credible reports of that. We do have a report of
Credible's doing a lot of work in that sense.
Right. But I mean, there was one white guy who's an American who was, I guess, taking geese from the park. We did have a report of that. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is there are better ways to make your argument, not you personally, but Donald Trump and JD Vance than what they did, which I thought were completely embarrassing. These Mexicans crossing the border, they're bad people. And I suppose some of them are good people. I just wish the conversation would start as, even if you do believe, like you do, Will, that 20 million people should be deported. Okay, that's a fair let's have that conversation like we are. But I just think the conversation that bothers me is painting the majority of these people out to be horrible people that want to come here and rape your wife and kidnap your family. I think you get what I'm saying, right? There's a way to have
I get that part of it.
Yeah. I
don't necessarily agree that Vance and Trump are doing that, but I agree. I understand that perspective. I think in general, like, there is this strange. I think one of the things that the Trump election, especially Trump winning more votes than Kamala, is a lot of people like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Trump is so, and I'm like, well, clearly not to the bulk of the public, right? Like there's this sort of, you're wondering about who is the person that you're embarrassed to say these things in front of. It's like the American people. Okay, well, the American people just voted for the guy, and I'm not just, and not,
I hear you. I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but